Mesopotamia was an ancient land in West Asia. It was a very important place in the history of the world. The name Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. The two rivers were the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. These rivers came down from the north and went south. At last, they went into the sea. People lived near these rivers because water was very important for life. Mesopotamia was not a small place. It was a wide area around the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. Today, much of this land is in Iraq. Some parts are also in Syria and other nearby countries. Long ago, this land had dry places, hot places, and open land. Rain did not always come at the right time. For this reason, people could not only wait for rain. They had to find a way to bring river water to their fields. Mesopotamia was part of an area called the Fertile Crescent. Fertile means that land is good for growing plants. A crescent is a shape like the moon when it is not full. On a map, this area looked like a big curved moon. The Fertile Crescent went from Mesopotamia through Syria and Palestine. It was called fertile because people could grow food there. Many early groups of people lived in this area. Before farming, people often moved from place to place. They looked for animals, fruit, nuts, and other food. But farming changed human life. When people learned how to grow food, they could stay in one place for a long time. They could build homes. They could have children and raise families. Small villages grew larger. Later, some villages became cities. In Mesopotamia, people made irrigation farming. Irrigation means bringing water to fields by human work. People dug long paths in the ground. These paths are called canals. River water went through the canals and into the fields. In this way, farmers could give water to plants even when rain did not come. Irrigation farming was very important in Mesopotamia. Irrigation farming was not easy. People had to work together. They had to dig canals. They had to clean the canals. They had to stop too much water from coming into the fields. They also had to make sure that all farmers got enough water. If a canal broke, water could hurt homes and fields. So many people had to make plans and work as one group. With irrigation farming, people could grow wheat and other grains. Wheat was a very important food. People made bread from wheat. They could also keep grain for a long time. This was different from some fruit and meat, which could not stay good for many days. Grain could be saved for a hard time. It could also be given to workers, priests, and soldiers. When farmers grew more food, they could feed more people. Not every person had to work in the fields. Some people became builders. Some became traders. Some became soldiers. Some became priests. Some learned how to write. Some made pots, cloth, tools, and other things. In this way, society became larger and more complex. As communities became larger, city-states appeared. A city-state was a city and the land around it. Each city-state had its own ruler, its own gods, its own army, and its own laws. City-states sometimes traded with each other. They also sometimes fought each other. Water, land, and trade were important reasons for these fights. The Sumerians were one of the first people to build city civilization. A civilization is a large and organized human society. It often has cities, farming, trade, writing, religion, laws, and skilled work. The Sumerians lived in southern Mesopotamia. We do not clearly know where the Sumerians first came from. Their language was different from the languages of many nearby peoples. The Sumerians built many city-states. Uruk was one famous city. It was near the Euphrates River and was a little north of Ur. Ur was also a very important city near the Euphrates River. North of Uruk was Lagash. These cities had homes, roads, fields, temples, markets, and walls. They were busy places full of people and work. Each Sumerian city-state was proud of itself. The people of Uruk felt close to Uruk. The people of Ur felt close to Ur. They had their own local god or goddess. They believed that their god protected their city. They built large temples for their gods. They gave food, animals, cloth, and other gifts to the gods. In Sumerian city-states, religion was closely connected with government. This kind of rule is called theocracy. In a theocracy, people believe that a god or the will of a god is very important in ruling the people. The king was often seen as a person with a special connection to the gods. In some cases, The king himself was treated like a god. Priests had an important place in Sumerian life. A priest was a person who worked for the gods and the temple. Priests led religious ceremonies. They gave gifts to the gods. They watched the sky and the moon. They also helped keep records. Temples were not only places for prayer, they were also places for work, food storage, and trade. Sumerian society had classes. This means that people did not all have the same place in society. At the top were the king, the royal family, high priests, and rich people. Below them were farmers, workers, traders, and soldiers. At the bottom were slaves. Slaves had very little freedom. They had to work for other people. The Sumerians built large holy towers, called ziggurats. A ziggurat was a tall building with levels. It looked like a large hill made by people, with steps going up. At the top was a holy place for a god. People believed that the god came down to this high place. The ziggurat stood over the city, and showed the power of the god and the ruler. A ziggurat was made mainly from mud bricks. In Mesopotamia, there was not much wood or stone in many places, but there was a lot of mud near the rivers. People mixed mud with water, and made bricks. They dried the bricks under the sun. These mud bricks were used for homes, walls, temples, and ziggurats. The Sumerians also made one of the oldest writing systems in the world. This writing is called cuneiform. The word cuneiform means wedge-shaped writing. A wedge is a small shape, with one wide end and one narrow end. The signs in cuneiform looked like small wedges, because writers pushed a pointed tool into soft clay. Cuneiform was usually written on clay tablets. A clay tablet was a small flat piece of wet clay. A writer used a reed tool to press signs into the clay. Then the clay tablet was left to dry. Some tablets became very hard, because they were put near fire. Many clay tablets have stayed in the ground for thousands of years. At first, cuneiform was used for simple records. People wrote about grain, sheep, land, work, and trade. For example, a tablet could say how much wheat came into a temple storehouse. It could say how many sheep belonged to a rich person. It could say how much food was given to workers. Writing helped people remember important facts. Later, cuneiform was used for many more things. People wrote letters. They wrote laws. They wrote stories. They wrote prayers and songs for gods. They wrote about kings and wars. They also wrote about numbers, stars, the moon, and time. Writing helped ideas live longer than one person's life. The Sumerians made important ideas about numbers. They used a number system called the sexagesimal system. This was a system based on 60. Today, many people use a system based on 10. We have 10 fingers, so this may feel natural. But the Sumerians often counted in groups of 60. The sexagesimal system still affects our lives today. 1 hour has 60 minutes. 1 minute has 60 seconds. A circle has 360 degrees. These ideas are connected to the old number system of Mesopotamia. It is surprising that people who lived so long ago still affect the way we tell time today. The people of Mesopotamia also watched the moon. They used a lunar calendar. A lunar calendar is based on the shape of the moon. The moon changes from a thin shape to a full moon and then back again. 1 month was often connected with one cycle of the moon. This helped people know when time had passed. But a lunar calendar did not always fit well with the year of the sun and the seasons. Farmers needed to know when to plant and when to bring in crops. So later people added ideas from a solar calendar. This made a lunisolar calendar. A lunisolar calendar used both the moon and the sun. It helped people connect months with the seasons. One famous old story from Mesopotamia is the Epic of Gilgamesh. An epic is a long story about a great hero. Gilgamesh was a king of Uruk in the story. He was strong and powerful, but he also had fears and sadness. The story tells about his friend Enkidu, his great journeys, and his search for life without death. In the Epic of Gilgamesh there is a story about a very great flood. In this story, water covers much of the land. One man is warned before the flood comes. He makes a large boat and saves life from the flood. This flood story is often said to be an early form of a flood story found later in Genesis in the Old Testament. The Epic of Gilgamesh is important because it shows the thoughts of ancient people. People in Mesopotamia asked big questions. Why do people die? Can a person live forever? Why do gods send trouble? What does it mean to be a good king? These are old questions, but people still ask similar questions today. The Sumerian city-states were strong, but they often fought each other. A city-state wanted good land, water, and trade roads. It wanted to be more powerful than other cities. Because of these wars, it was sometimes hard for one city-state to stay strong for a long time. New peoples also came into Mesopotamia from nearby lands. Around the 24th century BCE, the Akkadians came into Mesopotamia from the direction of Arabia. The Akkadians spoke a Semitic language. Semitic languages are a family of languages. Arabic, Hebrew, and other languages are also in this family. The Akkadians lived near the Sumerians and learned from them. The Akkadians did not only copy Sumerian life. They built their own power. Their famous leader was Sargon I. Sargon I became the founder of the Akkadian Empire. An empire is a large state that rules over many peoples and many lands. The Akkadian Empire was the first united state in Mesopotamia. He brought many city-states under his rule. Before him, Mesopotamia had many separate city-states. After Sargon I, one ruler controlled a much larger area. This was an important change. It showed that Mesopotamia could be ruled as one large country, at least for a time. The Akkadian Empire used soldiers, rulers, and officials to control its land. An official was a person who worked for the government. The king needed people to collect food and taxes. He needed people to watch cities. He needed people to lead armies. He also needed writing to send orders and keep records. The Akkadians used cuneiform, just as the Sumerians did. They used it to write their own language. This shows how ideas can move from one people to another. The Sumerians made cuneiform, but later peoples used it too. In Mesopotamia, writing became a shared tool for government, trade, religion, and learning. After the Akkadian Empire became weak, other rulers came to power. In southern Mesopotamia, the third dynasty of Ur became important. This is also called Ur III. Ur was again a great center of power. The rulers of Ur III tried to make a strong and organized state. One important king of Ur III was Ur-Nammu. Ur-Nammu is known for the Code of Ur-Nammu. A code is a set of laws. The Code of Ur-Nammu is often called one of the oldest law codes in the world. It shows that rulers wanted clear rules for people in their land. Laws were important because cities had many kinds of people and many kinds of work. People bought and sold things. They borrowed food and money. They married. They owned land. They sometimes hurt each other or took things that did not belong to them. A law code told people what was right and what would happen if they did wrong. The Code of Ur-Nammu did not make all people equal. The punishment for a rich person and the punishment for a poor person could be different. This was because Mesopotamian society had classes. Still, the code was important because it put laws into written form. Written laws could be read and used again later. Around the 19th century BCE, the Amorites came into Mesopotamia from the direction of Syria. The Amorites were another people who moved into this rich land. They built new states and took power in some places. One very important Amorite state was the First Babylonian dynasty. The First Babylonian dynasty made Babylon its capital. A capital is the main city of a country or kingdom. Babylon was near the Euphrates River. At first, it was not the most powerful city in Mesopotamia. But over time, Babylon became larger, richer, and stronger. Its rulers wanted to control more land. The most famous king of the First Babylonian dynasty was Hammurabi. He was the sixth king of the dynasty. During his time, Babylon reached its high point. Hammurabi fought wars, made plans, and brought all of Mesopotamia under his rule. He ruled many different peoples. Hammurabi was not only a king of war. He was also known for his laws. His laws are called the Code of Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi was written in cuneiform. It was put on a large stone for people to see. The stone showed that the king's laws were important. The Code of Hammurabi had many laws about daily life. There were laws about trade, land, farming, family, work, and crime. There were laws about builders and houses. If a builder made a bad house and the house fell down, the builder could face a serious punishment. The laws tried to make people responsible for their work. The Code of Hammurabi is famous for the idea, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This idea is called lex talionis. Lex talionis means that the punishment should be like the harm that was done. If someone hurt another person, the punishment could be similar to that hurt. To modern people, some punishments in the Code of Hammurabi may seem very hard. Also, the law was not always the same for every person. The punishment could depend on a person's class. A rich person, a poor person, and a slave might not receive the same treatment. This tells us that society was not equal. Still, the Code of Hammurabi was important in history. It showed that a king wanted to rule a large land with written laws. Hammurabi ruled many different peoples in Mesopotamia. Written laws helped him control them. The code also gives us a clear picture of life in ancient Babylon. While Babylon was strong in Mesopotamia, the Hittites were growing in Asia Minor. Asia Minor is also called Anatolia. It is in the area of modern Turkey. The Hittites were an Indo-European people. Indo-European is a large language family. English, Hindi, Persian, Greek, and many other languages are in this family. Around the middle of the 17th century BCE, the Hittites built a kingdom in Anatolia. Their capital was Hattusha. Hattusha was a strong city with walls and important buildings. The Hittite kings ruled from this city. They sent soldiers and leaders to different parts of their kingdom. The Hittites became powerful because they had strong armies. They used horses and chariots. A chariot was a light vehicle with wheels. It was pulled by horses. A soldier could stand in it and move quickly in battle. Chariots were very useful on open land. The Hittites were also known for using iron weapons. They were the first people to use iron weapons in a useful and wide way. Iron was harder than many older metals when people knew how to make it well. Iron tools and weapons could be very strong. This gave the Hittites an important advantage. At the beginning of the 16th century BCE, the Hittites attacked Babylon. They destroyed the first Babylonian dynasty. This was the end of the kingdom of Hammurabi and his family. Babylon lost its power for a time. But Babylon did not disappear. The city remained important for many years. After the fall of the first Babylonian dynasty, new peoples ruled different parts of Mesopotamia. In southern Mesopotamia, the Kassites ruled Babylonia. The Kassites came from outside Babylonia, but they took Babylonian ideas and ways of life. They used Babylon as an important center. The Kassites ruled Babylonia for a long time. During their rule, Babylonian culture continued. People still used cuneiform. They still worshipped gods and goddesses from Mesopotamian religion. They still traded and farmed near the rivers. This shows that a culture can continue even when new rulers come. In northern Mesopotamia, the Mitanni kingdom grew larger. The Mitanni controlled land in the north and had power in areas near Syria. Like other kingdoms, the Mitanni wanted good land, trade roads, and strong allies. They had contact with the Hittites, Egypt, and other powerful states. The ancient world was not made of separate places that never met. Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, Anatolia, and Egypt had trade and war with each other. Merchants traveled with goods. Soldiers traveled with kings. Letters went from one ruler to another. Ideas about writing, gods, tools, and law moved between lands. The Hittite kingdom later became weak. A group called the Sea Peoples attacked many places around the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The Sea Peoples were not one simple nation. They were groups of people who came by sea and fought or moved into new lands. Their attacks were part of a time of great change. The Sea Peoples destroyed the Hittite kingdom. Hattusha was left empty. The great Hittite state came to an end. This was a sad time for many people. Cities fell. Trade became difficult. Old kingdoms lost power. New Greeks and new states later appeared. Mesopotamia had many changes, but the rivers remained important. The Tigris River and the Euphrates River gave water to fields. They helped people travel and trade. They also brought danger. Rivers could flood too much. A flood could destroy homes and crops. People had to respect the power of nature. The people of Mesopotamia did not control everything. Even with irrigation farming, they faced dry years, floods, disease, war, and hunger. Their lives were often hard. Farmers worked under the hot sun. Workers carried mud bricks. Soldiers fought in wars. Families worried about food and safety. But the people of Mesopotamia made great things. They built cities. They made canals. They wrote on clay tablets. They made law codes. They watched the moon and stars. They counted with the sexagesimal system. They told stories about kings, gods, friendship, death, and floods. The Sumerians were especially important because they built some of the first city-states. Uruk, Ur, and Lagash were early examples of cities with organized government and religion. The Sumerians showed how people could work together to control water, grow food, and build large communities. Their cuneiform writing was also very important. Before writing, people had to remember things by speaking. Stories and facts could change over time. With writing, people could keep records. They could send messages. They could write laws and stories. They could leave ideas for people who lived much later. Clay tablets may look simple, but they are like voices from the past. On these tablets, people wrote about everyday things. They wrote about grain, sheep, workers, and taxes. They also wrote about great kings and gods. When we read these tablets today, we can learn about people who lived thousands of years ago. The ziggurats also tell us about Mesopotamian life. A ziggurat was not only a building, it was a sign of belief. It showed that people thought the gods were very important. It also showed that rulers and priests had power. Building a huge ziggurat needed many workers, much food, and careful plans. Theocracy was an important part of many Sumerian city-states. The ruler and the temple were closely connected. People believed that the gods gave order to the world. They believed that people had to serve the gods. The king had to protect the city, lead the army, and make sure that the gods received gifts. Class society was also clear in Mesopotamia. Some people had much land and power. Some people had little. A king lived very differently from a farmer. A high priest lived differently from a worker. A slave had almost no choice about work or life. This was not a fair society for everyone. The Akkadian Empire of Sargon I was important because it changed the idea of government. It was no longer only about one city-state. Sargon I ruled many cities and many peoples. This was an early example of an empire. Later rulers in other lands also tried to build large empires. Ur-Nammu and the Code of Ur-Nammu were important because they showed that laws could be written down. A written law code could tell people what the ruler expected. It could also help officials make decisions. Even though the laws were not equal for all people, they were an important step in the history of law. Hammurabi and the Code of Hammurabi became famous for a similar reason. Hammurabi ruled a large area with many peoples. He needed rules that could be used across his kingdom. The code was a way to show the king's power. It was also a way to make order in trade, farming, family life, and work. The words an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, are remembered today. They show the idea of lex talionis. People today may not agree with the old punishments. But the idea of making laws and deciding fair punishment is still important. The Hittites show us that Mesopotamia was connected to other lands. They lived in Anatolia, but they came to Babylon and changed Mesopotamian history. Their use of horses, chariots, and iron weapons helped them become strong. Their capital, Hattusha, was one of the important cities of the ancient world. The Kassites and the Mitanni also show that power moved from one people to another. No kingdom stayed strong forever. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Amorites, Babylonians, Hittites, Kassites, and Mitanni all had times of power. They fought, traded, learned, and changed. The Sea Peoples remind us that history can change quickly. Strong kingdoms can fall. A city with great walls can become empty. A king with a large army can lose power. But after hard times, people build again. New cities grow. New rulers come. Old ideas can live on in new ways.
The Fertile Crescent was one of the first great centers of human life. In this curved area of good land, people learned more about farming and city life. Mesopotamia was at the heart of this area. Its rivers made farming possible, but people's work made civilization possible. When we study Mesopotamia, we study the beginning of many important human ideas. We study irrigation farming. We study city-states. We study cuneiform and clay tablets. We study ziggurats and theocracy. We study law codes, numbers, calendars, stories, trade, war, and empire. We can imagine a farmer near the Euphrates River. The farmer wakes early. The sun is already hot. He walks to the field. He checks the canal. He makes sure that water goes to the wheat. He hopes the crop will grow well. His family needs food. The temple and the king may also need part of the grain. We can imagine a writer in a temple. The writer takes a wet clay tablet. He holds a reed tool. He presses small wedge shapes into the clay. He writes about grain or sheep. He may write a letter from one city to another. He may write a prayer. Then he leaves the tablet to dry. We can imagine workers building a ziggurat. They carry mud bricks. They climb up steps. They work together under the sun. The building becomes higher and higher. From far away, people can see it. They know that it is a holy place for their city's god. We can imagine a king such as Sargon I, Ur-Nammu, or Hammurabi. The king sits in a palace. Officials bring news from many cities. One city needs more grain. Another city has a fight. Soldiers are needed near a border. Merchants want safe roads. The king must make many hard decisions. We can imagine Hittite soldiers in chariots. Horses pull the chariots quickly over open land. The soldiers carry weapons. The sound of wheels and horses fills the air. The Hittites move toward a city or an enemy army. Their iron weapons and chariots help them become feared by other peoples. Ancient Mesopotamia may feel far away from us, but it is part of our shared human story. We still use 60 minutes in an hour. We still use laws. We still write records. We still build cities near rivers. We still need food, water, safety, and ways to live together. The people of Mesopotamia were not simple people without ideas. They were people who solved difficult problems. They learned how to bring water to dry fields. They learned how to organize large groups. They made writing. They made numbers and calendars. They asked questions about life and death. Mesopotamia teaches us that civilization did not appear in one day. It grew slowly. Farmers, workers, priests, writers, soldiers, traders, rulers, and families all played a part. A city needed food. Food needed water. Water needed canals. Canals needed people working together. The story of Mesopotamia begins with the land between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. It continues with the Fertile Crescent, irrigation farming, wheat, and city-states. It continues with the Sumerians, cuneiform, clay tablets, ziggurats, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. It continues with the Akkadians and Sargon I, with Ur-Nammu and the Code of Ur-Nammu, and with the Amorites and Babylon. It continues with Hammurabi and the Code of Hammurabi. It continues with the Hittites, Hattusha, iron weapons, chariots, the Kassites, the Mitanni, and the Sea Peoples. All of these people and places are parts of a long story. The story has war and sadness, but it also has learning and creation. Ancient people built things that lasted. Their cities are gone, but their ideas remain. Their clay tablets still speak. Their number system still helps us tell time. Mesopotamia was the land between two rivers, but it was also a land between the Old World and the New World of cities. It was a place where people learned to live in larger groups. It was a place where rulers made laws. It was a place where writers put human words into clay. When we remember Mesopotamia, we remember the power of water, work, writing, and ideas. We remember that people long ago were like us in many ways. They worked, loved, feared, hoped, fought, prayed, and told stories. They looked at the moon. They watched the rivers. They tried to understand their world.